Here's a full description of Jupiter's conjunctions with all the classical planets, according to the classical text Paldipika. We'll start off with quick keyword summaries of each conjunction, and then we'll go into details about each one. So if you have Jupiter conjoined Venus, you are really qualified. But if you have Jupiter conjoined Saturn, you're a wise barber. We'll definitely want to take some time and unpack that in a second. But let's move on to give keywords for the other 4 classical conjunctions, which we've actually already covered in previous videos. If you have Jupiter conjoined the Sun, you are an imposer. You're an imposer. You impose your moralities and rules and stuff like that. If you have Jupiter conjoined the Moon, you have a big mind. If you have Jupiter conjoined Mars, you're very, very powerful. And if you have Jupiter conjoined Mercury, you are a stage goer. While all of these keywords are really easy to remember and therefore useful, you should also make sure you understand the full meaning of it. And let's get into that now by looking at the actual text. So the Jupiter conjunction with Venus that I summarized as being really qualified. The details are Sadvidya, you're very educated, you're well educated. Dhanadhara, your spouse is really worth a lot. In other words, you have a good spouse. And Bahuguna, you have many, many good qualities. I'll explain why these are the expected outcomes of Jupiter with Venus in a second. But first, let's just take a quick look at some more detail on this weird conjunction, the wise barber, Jupiter with Saturn. So specifically what the text says is Gyeya. If you have Jupiter conjoined Saturn, you're knowledgeable. Yet also Shmashukara, you're a barber. You're wise, but you're a barber. Or you are a Ghatakrit, a potter. Or Annakara, like a waiter or a cook. So why are these words being thrown around for these conjunctions? Let's have a look at this, starting with Jupiter's conjunction with Venus. So if you have Jupiter conjoined Venus, you're highly qualified, and one of the reasons for that is you have a really good education, Sadvidya. Why? Why would we say this about Jupiter's conjunction with Venus? Well, it's because Jupiter symbolizes learning, because fundamentally it's the planet of increase. Increase means growing. Growing means raising and teaching. Teaching means education. Education means learning. So Jupiter is the planet that symbolizes learning, and Venus is also the planet that symbolizes learning. The reason why Venus also symbolizes learning is slightly different, and therefore it's a slightly different kind of learning, but it's because Venus symbolizes fundamentally femininity. Femininity has to do with beauty. Beauty has to do with perception. Perception has to do with accuracy. Accuracy has to do with refinement, and so it's learning in that sense, becoming more refined. So now we realize that if we have a Jupiter-Venus conjunction, we have a conjunction between 2 planets of learning, and this is why a classic text says if you got this conjunction, you're pretty well learned. Another thing that's said about this conjunction is Dhanadhara, you have a good spouse. Why is that? Well, Venus symbolizes your spouse. Why? Because she symbolizes femininity. Femininity means love. Love means unity. Unity means marriage. Marriage means spouse. So Venus symbolizes spouse, and Jupiter symbolizes goodness. Why? Because fundamentally it's increase. Increase means positive. Positive means good. So if you have a Jupiter-Venus conjunction, you take the planet of goodness and conjoin it with the planet of spouse. So that's why a classic text will tell you, hey, you have a good spouse. The other thing this text said about the Jupiter-Venus conjunction is that you are Bahuguna. You have a lot of good qualities. Well, why is that? As we said, Jupiter is the planet of goodness, and guess what? Venus is also the planet of goodness. Why? Because it symbolizes femininity. Femininity symbolizes beauty. Beauty symbolizes pleasure. Pleasure is a good thing. It's good things, pleasurable things, positive things. So Jupiter and Venus are on the same page when it comes to goodness. So what you're doing if you have a Jupiter-Venus conjunction is conjoining the planet of goodness with the planet of goodness. So the classic text will tell you you got a lot of goodness. You have many good qualities. Now this is typical of a classical text to only present one side of the story because it expects the reader to be fluent enough to infer the flip side. But a flip side of Jupiter-Venus conjunction is you might have too much goodness, too much pleasure, too much stuff like that, too much luxury. So it can lead to like an addictive mentality if it's in difficult conditions, like maybe if it's in Capricorn where Jupiter is debilitated. So you'll recognize both of those extremes in this list of names of famous people who have Jupiter-Venus conjunctions that are very tight. These are all within 3 degrees. John Belushi, Jerry Lewis, Jet Li, Roman Polanski, Anne Hathaway, Scarlett Johansson, Tom Waits, Axl Rose, Freddie Mercury, Trent Reznor. Now it's time to unpack this really interesting keyword, the wise barber. Jupiter's conjunction with Saturn. What's going on here? That would lead us to say that if you have Jupiter conjoined with Saturn, you're a wise barber. Well, first of all, Jupiter is wise. It's knowledgeable because it represents increase. Increase represents growing. Growing represents teaching. Teaching represents wisdom. So Jupiter has to do with wisdom. Saturn is not antithetical at all to wisdom. However, a more prominent trait is that it's very humble or basic. This is because it fundamentally represents decrease. Decrease means reduction. Reduction means reduced, subordinated. Subordinated means humble. So if we have a Jupiter-Saturn conjunction, what we've done is we've taken the planet of wisdom and conjoined it with the planet of humility. So a classic text like Paldipika comes and says, I think you are a wise barber. In other words, I think you're a very wise person who doesn't take a big position. A wise person who works in a humble position or in humble ways. Or we can say very practical about their learning. They apply their learning in very practical ways. And the text mentioned maybe you're a potter or maybe you are a waiter. These are 2 examples of humble wisdom. If you're a potter, you're an artisan. So you're very skilled. But you're making pots, something very simple, basic, and very useful and practical. So you're skilled but basic, or wise but humble. Waiter also, you're very knowledgeable, but knowledgeable about how to serve people. You're knowledgeable about the food that they want to eat. So you're very wise, but in a humble position again. So that is really the gist of what we're learning about Jupiter's conjunction with Saturn. Very wise, but very practical about the wisdom. You might recognize that in some of these names of famous people who have very tight Jupiter-Saturn conjunctions within 3 degrees. For example, take a person like Richard Pryor, actually a genius, very smart, but expresses himself as a comedian. Bruce Lee, very, very learned about what? Something very basic, fighting. Very, very philosophical, but not putting on a show of being some philosopher. Walt Disney or Hayao Miyazaki, they're cartoonists. So they're artists, but for children. It's another example of humble brilliance or wise barbers. And also I think these names, Ringo Starr, John Lennon, Frank Zappa, Alicia Keys, they kind of really illustrate musicians that are extremely talented, but very simple at the same time. So why is Mercury's conjunction with Jupiter described in this way? You're a stage goer. Well, first of all, it's because Mercury is the planet of talent. Jupiter is the planet of learning. Another thing to bear in mind is that Mercury is the planet of intellect. So if you conjoin the planet of talent with the planet of learning, the idea is that you become learned in talents. So we're really talking about having a lot of intelligence for sophisticated or refined or artful things. Hence, we can really unpack this whole idea as indicating a very intelligent and expressive person, a person who's intelligent about expression. Couple of examples of important people who have very tight Mercury Jupiter conjunctions. Bela Lugosi, Brigitte Bardot, Viggo Mortensen, or however you say that name. In other words, Aragorn. And Shirley Temple. And also finally, Lenny Kravitz. Mars conjoined Jupiter. You're a leader. You lead people. You might be a mayor or a president or something. Or you might be a wealth-seeking priest. So what's going on here? What's ticking behind this? Well, Jupiter is the planet of guidance or counsel, and Mars is the planet of command or dominance. So if you put the two together, you get well-counseled command. In other words, you're an effective leader. A king has command and good counsel. That's what makes an ideal king. But the other possibility here is a wealth-seeking priest. And mind you, priests are not supposed to seek wealth. So how would you know which side of this coin to expect in a chart? Look at which planet has the greater strength or dominance in the chart. If Jupiter is the more dominant planet when it's conjoined Mars, then you probably have leadership of the city, because the good counsel is the dominant part, and then it's affecting how you lead. But if the converse is true in the chart, Mars is the dominant one, then expect the wealth-seeking priest, because the dominant thing is motivation or selfish motivation, and then that's affecting your way that you guide people, the way that you act like a priest. Who are some people with Jupiter-Mars conjunctions? Well, again, Richard Nixon. His Mars-Mercury conjunction is within 1 degree, and his Mars-Jupiter conjunction is in 3 degrees, so you would interpret him mostly as a Mars-Mercury person. Also, there's these 3 people who you might not even know who their names are. In fact, I'm going to have to look, but they're extremely good examples of Jupiter-Mars conjunctions, especially this idea of wealth-seeking priest, and what it usually means in this day and age when priests don't really play a very dominant role anymore. So these 3 people from left to right are Jerry Yang, Jimmy Wales, and Paul Durov. But still, who is that? Well, Jerry Yang is a co-founder of Yahoo. Jimmy Wales is the co-founder of Wikipedia. And Paul Durov is the founder of something called VK, which is the Russian version or the Russian alternative of Facebook. These 3 people really illustrate what it means to be a wealth-seeking priest, because what is the priest really? The person who provides information and guidance. Yahoo, it's a search engine. You're looking for information. Wikipedia, it's an encyclopedia. You're looking for information. VK, it's a social networking site. You're looking for information about other people. And all these people have figured out how to make money and turn it into a business. Now let's have a look at the Jupiter-Moon conjunction, which I summarized as having a big open mind. Pali describes this conjunction with the word Vikranta. Vikranta means ambitious, a big mind. Vikranta means to do something special. So the Jupiter-Moon conjunction conveys the sense of not wanting to be ordinary, or not wanting to experience ordinary things, having extraordinary goals and ambitions, and having an enterprising attitude. This makes perfect sense because Jupiter is a planet of increase and the moon is a planet of our desires. So the conjunction of Jupiter and the moon increases the desires, making us more ambitious. Paladipika also describes the conjunction as Kula Mukhya. Kula means a community. Maybe it's a family, maybe it's a group, maybe it's a neighborhood, maybe it's a nation, whatever, but it's a community. And Mukhya means mouth. So what he's saying is the Moon-Jupiter conjunction signifies being the mouth of your community and the mouth for your community. So in other words, you're a capable spokesperson, and you're a capable teacher and instructor and guide. Mukhya also means the best, or the foremost, or the most obvious, the forefront. So Kula Mukhya also means the best in the community, the leader of the community. So again, like the advisor, the guide. Finally, Paladipika adds Astira Matim, Mati means opinion. And astira means unsteady or not fixed. So this means having an unfixed or unsteady opinion. Again, you want to look and see the house and the sign in which this conjunction is taking place to get an idea of exactly what you want to make out of this. But the baseline concept here is Jupiter is the planet of conclusions, wisdom, philosophy. But the moon is the planet of always changing things, because it's always changing its shape. So the moon-Jupiter combination or conjunction signifies having changing conclusions or changing opinions about things. What this basically means is having an open mind and not having a stubborn concept, being open to new ideas. So that's why I say an open mind. And to put a face on this, Nicholas Copernicus and Leonardo da Vinci both have very tight, very exact Jupiter-Moon conjunctions. Finally, let's take a look at the Jupiter-Sun conjunction, which seems to be the worst. It's supposed to indicate ethical imposition. In the original language is krura, anyakari, anirata. Krura is a very unusual word to mention when you're talking about Jupiter, because Jupiter is typically the opposite of krura. Krura means cruel or harsh, and Jupiter is usually generous and nice. So the next word, anyakari, is what they're cruel about. Anyakari means other people's business. Actually, other people's business is Jupiter's normal concern, because Jupiter cares about other people and likes to instruct other people. But it's usually very generous and giving and gracious about it. Here in this case, it's got krura anyakari, which means being cruel about how it evaluates other people. And the third word is anirata, which means ceaseless, or literally never ceasing to enjoy. So krura anyakari anirata means never ceasing to enjoy being critical of what other people are doing and sticking your nose in their business. That catchphrase, sticking your nose, always poking your nose in someone else's business, is basically what krura anyakari anirata means. So for Jupiter, we can express it in English and say Jupiter's conjunction with the Sun symbolizes asserting and imposing your moral principles in a critical and relentless way. Now, why does this happen to Jupiter? Why does Jupiter have such a turnaround from Somya to Krura by the Sun's combustion? The reason is that Jupiter is usually very, very bright and very, very visible. It's almost as bright as Venus, and it's much more visible because it's not as close to the Sun. Venus's proximity to the Sun makes it used to the Sun's combustion. Jupiter's great distance from the Sun makes it more visible usually, but also makes its conjunction with the Sun more unusual, and is more affected by its dimming and occlusion or combustion. Let's just talk for a minute about this. These are beans. You'd probably get a stomachache unless you're a bird if you tried to eat them. But look at this. This is soup made from these beans. Would you eat this? Certainly, it's yummy. So why should we start talking about food all of a sudden? Because this is your chart, and this is something in your chart. Like, for example, your conjunction of Mercury with Jupiter, or whatever it is. You don't actually taste the flavor of an individual ingredient in a recipe. You taste the combination of all the ingredients in the recipe. So a video like this will help you understand what the ingredients contribute to the recipe. But don't just take only the ingredient and try to eat it and expect it to be perfect for you. If you like all these concepts and how I'm explaining things and so forth, you'd probably love to get one of my reports on your birth chart, which you can do if you go to victicara.com and click on the readings button and check out all the different options.